The Leader Grows podcast. I am your host, Ken Joslin. And if you follow this podcast at all over the past year, you know how important therapy, becoming the best version of yourself, our core five: faith, health, relationship, business, and finance, how important that is to me. I have got one of my favorite therapists that I follow. I told her on pre-talk, somebody go, I promise you I'm not stalking you. I just love your stuff. Dr. Elizabeth Frederick, from Evolve Counseling in Scottsdale, Arizona. Listen, welcome to the show this morning.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, we've been connected on Instagram for quite some time. And yeah, your engagement is very clear that it resonates with you. And I appreciate that. That's why I do what I do. Like, I want to know it's resonating. So I don't feel stalked at all. I feel appreciated. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, I've got you and Jillian and a few other friends out there. And I'm like, I promise, guys, I'm not stalking you. Stuff is so good. And I'm sharing it. People ask me all the time, as somebody that does what I do, they're like, you share other people's stuff more than you share your own. And I'm like, listen, when I see something that resonates with me, and I'm like, yes, because again, I shared off air a little bit. And those of you guys that listen to this podcast, you know my story. And when I see something that resonates, I'm like, yes, this information is so good. It needs to get out to everybody. Let's talk about, you talk a lot about intimacy, attachment, relationship, toxic relationships. Let's talk about relationships. We've got a lot of people that are in relationships that listen to this podcast, and we've got a lot of people that are single that listen to this podcast. And the majority of them are very driven entrepreneurs who are not just about business and finances, but really our core five being faith, health, relationship, business, and finance, and become the best version of yourself in those core five areas. Talk to us about a single entrepreneur who is looking for a relationship. You're smiling already before I get
I'm like, are we talking about me now? Like, is this you like putting me out there? By the way, she's single, guys. So
there we go. There we go.
Yeah. That is one of the, there's a couple pieces of irony that I am so single doing the work that I do. And the other piece of that, which I hear a lot of entrepreneurs, you and I can relate to this, being high achieving in so many areas, but struggling relationally. And I get that question a lot of like, I do so well, or can be so driven or so smart, ambitious in certain areas, but why are relationships so hard? And relationships are so hard because, first of all, the template that we're given, which is a lot of what I talk about with relationship programming, for a lot of us, the template was not so great. We did not have the love, affection, attention, nurturance that we needed to thrive. And we also did not have that role modeled. And so the other piece of it that makes them so hard is relationships send us into a threat state in the way that nothing else does. Because as humans, we are designed, literally designed at our core for connection. And so when the thing we crave the most is feeling accepted and belonging, and the biggest thing we fear is rejection and abandonment, that is relationships, and that is hard.
So how do you process through that with you? I didn't know you were single. How do you process through that? I mean, you're single, and this is what you do. It's like being a mechanic that drives a broke down car, I guess, from the outside looking in.
Ken, I mean, not quite.
I mean, how do you, I mean, I guess it's got to be hard for you because you are high achieving. You do know exactly what you're looking for. So how do you process through that?
I think that's part of it, is that I do know exactly what I'm looking for. So maybe it's like a mechanic who's not going to settle for the broke down car, right? So they're going to keep working until they can afford the one that they want. I've been divorced, yes, for going on 4 years. My ex-husband is my absolute best friend in the world. We have a wonderful relationship. We have a teenage son together. And in that sense, I can say I don't suck at relationships. So that's not what's going on, because, my ex-husband is one of the closest people to me. But I struggle in the same way that a lot of people do with my template, with my programming. The way that I was raised was role modeled the toxic dynamic is what all I knew. And that didn't hit me until a therapist kind of said, like, probably in my mid-20s, like, hey, by the way, maybe your upbringing wasn't as great as you're thinking it was. And that since then, has really set things in motion for me. So I would say that the single part is because halfway, because I'm very selective, because I want somebody emotionally mature, emotionally intelligent, who can meet my needs, and I'm not going to settle for less. And then the other half of it is that I'm still reprogramming too, and I still have healing to do.
Yeah. Walk me through the process when you talk about, you again, doing what you do and the information you put out, what does the process look like for you? I mean, it's when you are where you are, and I was single for a lot of the last 2.5 years. It's hard to find somebody's like, well, you just need to find somebody in Birmingham. I'm like, I live in Birmingham. Like, do you understand what you're saying? Like, I travel all across the country, to Atlanta and Miami and Scottsdale and LA and all. I mean, like Birmingham, like, is there somebody that exists in Birmingham, Alabama that fits literally what I'm looking for? And I mean, one of my parts of my therapy with Lauren that we mentioned off air, I literally have got it's about 8 paragraphs of what my ideal partner looks like, exactly what she looks like. So how do you process through? Let's just jump into, we're going to interview you then.
Sure.
Like, what does it look like? What's the dating pool look like for you? How do you assess, yes, I want to go out on a date with this guy. No, I don't want to date. What do first conversations look like with somebody like you on a date when you know exactly what you're looking for?
Yeah, which, yes, can be probably pretty intimidating. I often don't even make it to the first date because, again, how busy I am, how many businesses I'm running, everything I'm doing. I am very even selective in how I use my time. So I'm going to gauge just by interaction, and whether it's texting or phone calls, things like that, of what does the emotional maturity look like? But even beyond that, what does their self-awareness look like? That is one of the biggest things missing for a lot of people, is knowing, how are you showing up? How are you presenting yourself? And even knowing kind of what you and I talked about prior to recording, how our past is really influencing where we're at present day. And so I kind of just gained some insights around, how are they able to hold conversation? What is their ability to validate, to reflect back to, and not that I need somebody to be perfect in those ways. I'm happy, to, I don't want to say teach, but I'm happy to enlighten somebody on those things. You know what I mean? If they seem like they're wanting to know that. But I have to know that you want to grow and that you have a desire to do that. So I would say the dating is very limited for me because of that. And yeah, I hope for that to be different. When you're talking though about your 8-page, I really caution a lot of my clients against that. So just,
no, it's just 8 paragraphs. I mean, I've got some stuff out of Proverbs 31.
Oh, okay.
Some things that I'm looking
so
for.
Are they
as
like
far as
8 points that are just like put into a paragraph?
Wants to be an entrepreneur. Like, she's entrepreneurial. She loves to work out. She loves to go to the gym with me.
Yeah.
She loves to laugh. She loves to sing, even if she can't. Like, there are some, we love to cook in the kitchen together. Like, there are just some things on there that I'm like, yes, like this
Sure.
is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Like, I want somebody to do life with. I don't have to be around you all the time, but I want somebody to get up in the morning with and go, okay, we got a 5 a.m. F45 class or a 6 a.m. I'm going to ask those to make your coffee. You go get ready and I'll get everything done. Like, those are some of the things for me that it's, at 55 now, it's companionship, and let's grow together. And literally, we should be in a position to where we're helping each other become the best version of ourselves.
Totally agree. And at 38, that's exactly what I want. That is, that I don't, it's not, I have a post that talks about, like, your physical appearance is the least interesting thing about you. Like, these are all the things that I want to know. And a big part of that is what you're describing. I want partnership. I want companionship. I want somebody who's on the same page with the desire to grow. What I was going to say about that, though, is, like, I talk a lot about the, 5 needs, 5 wants, and 5 boundaries, which really summarizes what you're describing. I think what's going on for a lot of us single people, or a lot of just people in the, even if they're in relationships, we get in that grass is greener mindset, and we are on the quest for the unicorn. And the unicorn does not exist, my friends, but really good people with good hearts who want to show up better, that does exist. And that's what I'm looking for.
But don't you, so for me, don't you think it's just Like, you don't have to be perfect, even in the areas that I've listed for myself.
Yeah.
You don't have to be perfect, but just the will and the want to and the desire.
Yes.
When you say, hey, babe, when you said this hurt my heart and this is how it made me feel. Oh, you know what? Hey, I'm really sorry. Tell me about that.
Yeah.
Needing that to go both ways.
For sure.
So what do you do if you are in a relationship? You just mentioned some people are grass is not greener, and it's never greener on the other side,
Yeah.
right? What do you say to some of those people that are in a relationship that are like on the fence? Like, do I stay? Do I not stay? What are some of the things? There's a difference between someone not meeting your needs or not being who you need them to be, and somebody being toxic.
Absolutely.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah. And thank you for clarifying that, because we want to lump everybody into toxic and narcissism and all of those things. And that's not the case at all. Some people just don't know. They literally lack the knowledge. They lack the skills. So I have an assessment that I do with whether an individual or a couple, if they're kind of on the fence about should I stay or should I go, which is a very common question. But what I also help them dig into is really along the lines of what you're suggesting, that does that person have a desire to change? Are they demonstrating efforts towards change? So if they meet most of your or all of your needs, like your primary needs, but maybe they aren't showing up perfect in those ways, but they're trying and you can see that they're trying. And when you give them feedback, they're like, babe, I'm so sorry. Like you're right. I see exactly what you're saying. I'm going to work on that. Not I'm going to try. Okay. I'll see if I can do better, but like, I am going to work on that. That's one of the biggest things to me. I talk to, when I'm working with couples, I'll tell them that. I'll say, you guys, like, you both have a desire to change. Like, that is a hard thing to find, a partner who actually wants to make change. Try to roll with that before you just throw in the towel, because there's not a lot of people.
So should that be your headline on Luxy and Bumble, looking for a partner who's willing to change?
I have on there on my bio, I say emotionally intelligent, personal growth. Yeah.
But do you think they understand what, I guess if they click, they understand what emotional intelligence?
No, Ken, they don't even read it. They'll be like, so do you want to have more kids? Literally my second line is I'm not having more kids. No, nobody's even reading it. So
that's crazy.
It is.
It's so crazy. So talk about some toxic behaviors. Like sure. I think we understand the difference between somebody who's trying and really wants to do it. And I really feel like when you're connected and you love somebody and you've got a partner and they are trying to change, man, there's just a special grace and mercy for that kind of relationship where you're just like, yes, like we can do this together kind of thing. But talk about some of the toxic things that happen or that you've seen in relationships.
Yeah, I'm putting the disclaimer on that, even that we all have toxic behaviors in our relationships. So even if we are not narcissistic, even if we aren't malicious, we still all show up in a toxic way from time to time. So some of those would be gaslighting as one of the biggest buzzwords. That's when we are trying to get someone to question the reality, where basically it's a crazy making behavior is what we would call it. So somebody's expressing maybe how they even feel about something. And we're like, no, you don't feel that way. Manipulation, very common, which ties in with gaslighting. Basically just trying to get someone to shift their perspective or like trying to control somebody's perspective. Breadcrumbing. Are you familiar with that? So basically
that's a new one. So you have to so
breadcrumbing falls in the category of manipulation in the sense where maybe you're giving just enough time or attention to somebody to keep them hooked on you. So like you're giving them just enough so they don't go find somebody else, but you're not actually like wanting to show up for their needs.
Yeah. No. So if you got somebody that's in a relationship where there's some toxic behaviors, obviously you said they're both, we're human beings.
Yeah.
We make mistakes. And I think the quickest way or one of the healthiest ways in a relationship is just to admit it. Man, babe, I kicked it. I'm really sorry. How can I make this right between us? And what can I do? How can I help you get better? How can you help me get better? Again, how can we become the best version of ourselves? Walk us through what you do when you're counseling or you're doing therapy with a couple, and there is some super toxic behavior in there. How does one person in a relationship handle or communicate with the one that is displaying some toxic behavior.
Yeah. And a distinction between toxic behaviors and toxic relationship is important here, because those toxic behaviors that we all demonstrate, we all manipulate, we all say things we regret, we all do those things. But a toxic relationship is really characterized by you're in this infatuation stage. Something triggers partner A, which makes them react, and the way they react triggers partner B. Now, partner A and B are being completely immature children towards each other. That often escalates, becomes really damaging, really hurtful for both people, which is important to note. It's not one victim here. Both people are hurt. What often happens from there is either, if they're living in the same home, they might go days without talking, or if they don't live in the same home, they might completely break up. One person ends up putting out like feelers. The other person grabs onto those feelers and they start talking again, but nothing is resolved. So as you said, of the like, hey babe, can we talk through this? Or I'm so sorry, that doesn't happen, because there's like a huge fear that that's just going to create the conflict again. So nothing is talked about, brushed under the rug, and then back to the infatuation stage. So that is the definition of a toxic relationship. So when I'm seeing that, when a couple comes to sit down and I'm seeing these things happen, I always start couples work with relationship programming. And so what that means is I'm going to go through timeline of partner A and timeline of partner B. And we're going to be in the same room while we do that. And we identify trauma themes that have happened since day one, so that when we are then dissecting a recent conflict, they both are aware of what's going on for their inner child, their partner's inner child. And so we can come from a place of grace and patience and love and nurturance versus you are just intentionally trying to hurt me. It's a complete game changer.
Yeah. What are some questions to ask? How do you frame the conversation when let's say one of your partners is elevated? We talked off air a little bit about my friend G.S. Youngblood's book, The Masculine Relationship, about how the masculine holds space for the feminine, and just literally, even if she's like, just hold space. Yep. And just hear and listen. But what are some, because you said something just a minute ago, that we get afraid to mention, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling? We're almost afraid to touch base because we think it's just going to kick in the love and respect, but because of the crazy cycle. Like it's going to kick the crazy cycle all over again. What are some ways to communicate that literally can disarm a situation?
So the most effective tool that I really encourage all of my clients to use, that I use, is validate. RVE. I'm so sorry. That was very hard to get out. So reflect, validate, and explore. So RVE. So reflect is you're going to reflect back what you just heard your partner say. V is you're going to validate their experience. And then E, you're going to explore. And explore does not mean you're going to interrogate. You're going to tell them why they're wrong. You're going to tell them like to suck it up. That's not the E at all. It is, we're going to ask questions like, can you tell me more about that? How can I show up for you? What do you need from me right now? So when I share this tool with a lot of people, they might feel overwhelmed because it's 3 different steps. And so, it's like, okay, that's a lot of words. It doesn't have to be a lot of words. If they come home and they say, my boss was really mean to me today, I'm in a bad mood, I'm irritable, like I'm just really upset. We can easily say, geez, that sounds like you had a really hard day with your boss just being on you today. You must be really feeling overwhelmed, sad, maybe even scared about that. How can I show up for you tonight so that I can help you calm down? That's RVE in a nutshell. Like that's all it is. That is the most effective way to disarm, because if they're coming home saying I'm irritable, that means usually they're ready to go. Like whatever you want to fight about, let's fight because I'm in a bad mood. Okay, but we can address that differently.
No, I love that. Reflect, validate, and explore.
Yes.
One of the things that I've learned, obviously, through my therapy in the last year is questions like, hey, when you said, this is what I heard you say, did you mean,
reflect? Mm-hmm.
Really just asking some questions and and I found sometimes when I say, hey, what I heard you say is, and I'll say it, oh, no, that's not what I meant. What I meant was, sometimes you'll get that as well. What do you think are some of the top tools for keeping situations from getting elevated and escalated?
Yeah. So first and foremost is I statements, which is the most well-known. So we're going to express any grievance with how we're feeling, not what the other person did. And then emotional regulation skills are the most underrated, overlooked skill in a relationship. Like, if you don't know how to manage your own triggers and regulate your own emotions, you are already behind the 8 ball before that conversation even starts. Because likely what's going to happen is you are going to feel ruffled by something that is said in a hard conversation. And if you aren't aware of why you're feeling ruffled and how to calm that down, that's when it starts to escalate. And so I really encourage people, the 3 W's is one of the tools that I encourage people to use. So that's what's going on. So you're aware of the physiological response in your body. A lot of people don't realize that we all have a physiological response before anything else. And so if you can know, like, is that tightness in your chest? Is that your stomach hurts? The second W is, where's it coming from? So you sit and reflect. Yeah, I really don't like the tone my partner just used with me. That did not feel great. And the third W is, what do I need? Okay, so that might mean I need to go take a quick time out. I need to take some deep breaths. I need to maybe tell my partner, hey, my feelings are really hurt by the way you address that. But that tool for emotional regulation, the 3 W's, is really powerful.
I love that. So we're talking about relationships. We're talking about single. We're talking about when you're in a relationship, relationships where it's not necessarily toxic, but you're not getting your needs met, but people are teachable. Toxic relationships or toxic behavior, which all of those things, when we get those things right, can lead to healthy intimacy. One of my favorite posts you had on there was things that you can, intellectual foreplay, like things you can do before being physically intimate that lead to. And I mean, as a dude, I think for most guys, you're like, oh, really? I have no idea. Two things. I want to talk through that. You said something earlier, I actually took a note down, which is really cool. Was you said, the first thing I'm looking at a guy isn't how he looks or what kind of shape he's in. Touch on that, and then I want to jump over to this, because I think that's huge. And I think a lot of guys may miss that. They may look at a certain individual and go, oh, she's too fill in the blank for me.
Sure.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, which completely correlates with that intellectual foreplay, because that is my foreplay. That is how somebody is going to get my attention any day of the week. So a big part of that, and I think it applies for a lot of people, but a lot of women, is we want to feel safe. We want our emotional needs met. We want our intellectual needs met. We want emotional intimacy before anything else is even desired. So even when we're talking about sexual arousal or desire or anything like that, when I'm sitting down with a couple, often, and this is stereotyping, so don't come at me for it, but this is just the way it is. But the female often comes in, in heteronormative relationships, the female is going to come in and going to say, my emotional needs are not being met. And the male is going to say, my sexual needs aren't being met. And they're at this impasse of neither one of them are willing to come towards each other's needs. They're just worried about their own. And so a big part of that is, like, for her, she can probably get there, but how are her emotional needs or intellectual, or how are you guys spending time together outside of that sexual? So that's a big part of that. When I'm talking about, like, yeah, someone's physical appearance, like, that doesn't do it for me. That's not it at all. I'm going to be the most connected or attracted to somebody based on the depth of our conversations. Can they teach me something, challenge me, all of those things?
I love that. So let's hit your intellectual foreplay. I love these things. You've got going on dates, museums, art shows, concerts, the theater. Sam's Club and Costco doesn't count on that. You have to be. I'm just joking. Talk about some of the things that you had on your list, and how really that's just an emotional connector.
Sure.
And how men could, because we're visual creatures, how that emotional thing, and maybe even why is it hard for some men to open up on the emotional side like that?
Yeah. So that particular post comes from, I talk a lot about the 5 types of intimacy, as a post I did last year that really connected for a lot of people. And I talk about intellectual, emotional, experiential, spiritual, and then physical intimacy, and how that is the holistic sense of intimacy that we all need, that, intimacy is not just the one thing that we often characterize it as. And so the reason I've done those posts then to follow up has been like, okay, so how can you create this connection? How can you be more intentional with connecting on an emotional or an intellectual level? So those things that I posted on the intellectual list, having those deep conversations and really understanding each other's inner worlds and challenging each other, teaching each other things, that fosters a sense of safety and connection, almost like a bond, a partnership. Because yes, like you and I in the work that we do, we are having deep conversations with a lot of people. Most people are not. So when you're really having those deep, get under the surface conversations, that's an investment. And so when a female does feel that, in this particular situation, a male is investing in her in that way, she's like, okay, he's after more than just my body. That has my interest now.
I love that. So I love that. The other thing that I wanted to jump into, this is probably one of my favorite things you talked about, was you gave a list of, it doesn't make you needy if you, and then you have a list of things. It's funny because I walking through therapy like I have over the past year and a half, like relationships seem to be about 4 to 6 weeks, because that's about what it takes to go, okay, this is like, one of them was, your first one on the list is you want to receive good morning or good night text. Yeah. It's like, hey, we don't have to talk for 10 minutes. I just want to connect with you before you go to bed, or I just want to connect with you in the morning before I get going. And when that's a no-go, it's like, nope, okay, I have to move on. I think what people think, Elizabeth, is well, if I do this, I'm being needy. Or if I ask for this, then I'm just asking for too much.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that comes from how we're raised, because we don't see it done in a healthy manner. Speak to some of those things that you've got on the list, and some of the things that really we're created to desire and need from our partner, and it doesn't make it needy if we do.
Yeah, we are created that way. And unfortunately, we're then programmed to think that that's too much. And so a lot of us who carry the beliefs that I am needy, it is because in these early interactions with our caregivers, and then are often perpetuated and really reinforced throughout childhood, is this idea that we were an inconvenience, that we were a burden, that if we had a need, for me and my upbringing, emotional needs were not a thing. First of all, nobody knew how to deal with that. Their programming, they were not equipped to deal with it. Second of all, they didn't have the patience or the emotional maturity to deal with it. So some of my earliest memories are, I grew up in a very tiny home, and you can hear a pin drop across the house. Like, you can hear it. And I would be crying in my room, and it would never be acknowledged. So it didn't take very long for me to realize, you're wasting your time, my friend, by crying. So suck it up. And that's exactly what I did. And so then going into adulthood, the idea was like, if I have these needs, if I want to be attended to, if I want to be nurtured, that's just needy. That's weak. And so it does come from our programming. And the bigger part of relationship programming, the part that needs to be understood, is that the way that we're programmed is what we become to believe is the norm, and just the way that things are.
Yeah.
Yep. So then when we're seeking out our adult relationships, we are seeking people who are familiar to that and who remind us of our norm. That's all we know. So now these really deep-seated negative core beliefs about ourselves, about others, about relationships as a whole are reinforced over and over and over. And we keep thinking, well, see, I mean, they proved it. And the reality is, like, they is anywhere between 3 to 10 people out of 7 billion. So they didn't prove anything. It's who you keep choosing.
So how do you sift through? I mean, if you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s and you're different because you're doing things that most people aren't doing.
Sure.
How in the world do you sift through? Because I'm all of my rules are good. Like, when do you have that conversation? Like, how far into it do you have a conversation? I like how you said earlier about I can gauge it by text, I can gauge it by self-awareness, like all of those things. But how far into the conversation do you go, oh, hey, by the way, I've got a list, and right here's my list. Obviously, you don't do that, but you know what I'm saying. Like, how do
Oh,
you
I
shift?
wouldn't say you don't do that. I wouldn't
Yeah.
say at all you don't do that. I
Yeah.
think some of those needs you're going to notice pretty quick. So like, for me, I need to have a financial partner. So I need somebody who has the same work ethic and drive as I do. I'm going to know that pretty quick. Somebody who's emotionally intelligent. I'm going to know that pretty quick. So my needs, I'm going to be able to tell. The wants, maybe these are our preferences. So that would be nice to have. Those might take a little bit longer to tell, but a big way to know is like how somebody shows up consistently. So are their words and their actions aligning? That's one of the best ways that you're going to be able to tell the difference. And how do they respond when you set a boundary and when you have your first hard conversation? What is their response to both of those things? I'm going to tell you right now, that's going to give you a whole lot of clarity around if that's the person you want to move forward with.
How do you have a hard conversation? Give us the language. Like if you've got something that happened or something that made you feel a certain way, talk to us about how you have that conversation. Because I think that's some of the things that people miss.
Yeah. So a few things already need to be set before you even go into hard conversation, which is the first thing that people miss. You need to ensure that you both are in a calm headspace. You're in the right environment. That means often not, with people interrupting a lot, not after somebody's hard day at work, those type of things. So we're both in a calm headspace. We're in a protected environment. And then we start the hard conversation by using that I statement. So we're going to come at that with how we are feeling about what is going on. We're not going to tell them, what they did or dictate to them how they feel. So that might be, let's say somebody's working a lot of hours. You're not feeling like a priority. This may or may not be a part of my life that comes up a lot. So that would look like, hey, I'm really missing you lately. I'm feeling really disconnected. I want more time together. I'm not feeling like a priority right now. I'm wondering if we can explore a way to fix that. Is there a way we can collaborate on a solution? Because I'm really desiring connection with you. So in that statement, I didn't say you work too much. You don't care about me. You only care about work. Okay. I maybe have said that before in hard conversations, but that is not how we're going to approach it. And so, really laying the foundation for it and then coming at it from a place of like, this is my heart. So it's not about criticism. It's about like, this is how I feel. I also encourage people to kind of give a heads up if they want to have a hard conversation. It's really unfair to catch your partner off guard. Maybe it's a Friday night, 8:00. You guys just sat down, a glass of wine in front of a movie. And you're like, by the way, I wanted to tell you, like, that's really unfair. And it happens a lot.
Right. Yeah. The one thing I love to do is, hey, can we get 15 minutes today or tomorrow or 30 minutes? I got something I want to talk about. And I just want it to be you and I. And it needs to be uninterrupted space. Yep. Some things there.
And sometimes on that note, if I can just expand for real quick, sometimes it can be helpful even to kind of give like the umbrella of what you want to talk about. Because I know for me, if somebody says, hey, I want to talk to you about something, like my gut immediately like drops. And so sometimes just saying like, putting a little bit of a awareness around what the conversation is can just help them to prepare for that.
Yes. I mean, it really is EQ. It's like, and if you're in a healthy partnership, you don't want your partner to worry.
Exactly.
You don't want their gut to drop. It's funny because you talk about all the things that we go through in my somatic therapy with Lauren. Like you don't want those things to happen. You want them to go, hey, I love you. I'm committed to you. And this was the next question I was going to ask. What does healthy language look like in a relationship so that when you have, because you said the first hard conversation, you're going to know where someone's at. What does healthy conversation look like in communication look like leading up to where it's like, hey, once we've committed to one another and we're seeing what God does. I want to be committed to you. You want to be committed to me. What does that healthy communication look like? So they're comfortable. So your partner's comfortable they know you're not going to go, oh, well, I'm not good enough, or I'm not this, or I'm not that. They're going to leave me like my parent did, or they're going to leave me in the room crying like I did when I was in a little bitty house and nobody's going to come and save me.
Yeah. Yeah. When we are really committed to the safety of our partner's hearts, that comes through with the way that we interact with them. And when when that is the foundation of the relationship, you can have these hard conversations and know that I'm bringing this up because I care about you. I'm bringing this up not because want to abandon you, but because I want to fix it, because I want to be with you. Like, the reasons for it look so different when the commitment is to safety. And a big part of, when I said, like, I know pretty quick with a hard conversation, somebody who can't take accountability, who can't take ownership, who is justifying, who's making excuses, who's deflecting, those are some things to be aware of. And it's not that those things can't change, but those of us that are in our 30s and 40s and like, we're not out here trying, like, nobody has time to fix or change somebody.
Nobody's got time for that. Right. Nobody's got time for that.
The odds of somebody actually changing, not very high. So if you express to somebody, that how you're feeling and you're using appropriate, healthy language, and they come back to you and say, well, you do that too, or no, that's not what happened, or any of those type of things, it's a pretty good indicator that they're not in this for a reciprocal exchange.
Yeah, I love that. They're in it for what they can get for themselves. Relationships are hard. And, on my health journey over the past 3 years, I've dropped 80 pounds. In my journey, I love to work out, but it's work. Like, the journey's been hard, not just on my physical, but just even in my emotional, my mental health, all the work that I've done over the last year and a half. What are some things and some steps that you would encourage couples to take? Because the journey it's still hard. I mean, relationships aren't easy. You can take two of the most compatible people who love each other like crazy, but it's still hard.
Yep.
What are some things you would encourage them to do to work on their relationship, just like going to the gym and eating healthy would be if you want to be physically fit?
Yeah. So the first thing, whether you are in a relationship or single and you're wanting to improve relationships in general, start by, if you're not working with a therapist, do your own timeline. Do your timeline, identify your themes, understand your trauma, so that you know your triggers, why you get reactive to things. So that self-awareness is the most important thing to lay that foundation. And then learn and practice emotional regulation skills. Learn how to stay calm, logical, appropriate, mature during hard conversations. And then learn so many books, so many podcasts, so many everything, just communication skills, connection rituals. But when we're talking about a couple specifically, a couple of the really big things that I suggest is weekly check-ins. That is, I'm going to be talking to every couple about that. You have protected time on the calendar that you are sitting down with a few questions. You can change them up each time. They can be the same, but it's, did you feel like your love language got met this week? Did you feel like we were connected? When did you feel most connected? How can I show up better next week? So you're asking these questions to really do a pulse check every single week, because how many couples do we know? Like, you're just ships in the night. You're just going through the motions, especially if you're in a long distance relationship. And when you're not making it a priority, it's very easy for things to unravel. So the check-ins, and then daily connection rituals. And those can be, like you were saying, it's the good morning or good night text. It can be a 5-minute check-in. I love what was the high and what was the low of your day for a connection ritual. But basically my point being, find ways to connect, because we are a culture of busy.
Yeah, we're going 100 miles an hour. Listen, number one, thank you so much for spending time. I know you're ridiculously busy. Best place for people to get in contact with you?
So my Instagram at Dr. Elizabeth Fedrick, and my website, drelizabethfedrick.com. Both of those would be, my coaching information is on my website, and that would be the best way to get a hold of me.
And you got a new book coming out.
Tell us
about it.
Yes, beginning of November. So it's called Relationship Reprogramming, and it is explaining, what I've been talking about with the timeline. It teaches people how to do the activity for themselves, and it intertwines my upbringing and my trauma, and helps people to see reprogramming through that lens. So I am the example of it, but it really teaches you how to apply that information.
Yeah, it's fun watching you do what you do, because you are so passionate about it. And when we are super passionate about something, it's normally because we lived it out.
Yeah.
And one of my affirmations is, I'm whole. I choose to use past pain to help others find healing. Yeah. So literally every day when I look in the mirror and I do my affirmations, it's like, listen, you went through these things that you went through so that you can help people go through it quicker, go through it with less damage, go through it and understand And here's how I get to come out on the other side and be a better version of myself.
And to not feel so alone in it, so that it is normalized for them that they are not alone in this chaos that we're living. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This has been great.
No, you're more than welcome. Guys, thank you for joining us on another episode of As a Leader Grows podcast. As always, if this has added value, do me a favor, click that subscribe button, snap a screenshot, share it. Dr. Elizabeth and I would both love to share that on our Instagram and give you a shout out